Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a success story that, well, it really changes how you think about corporate greatness. We're unpacking The Outsiders, 8 unconventional CEOs and their radically rational blueprint for success. And let's dive straight in, maybe with a question. If you had to pick the absolute best CEO of the last, say, 50 years, just based on performance, who comes to mind? I know for me, and probably most people, you think of the big names, right? Like Jack Welch at GE. Huge returns, 20.9% compounded annually. Yeah. That's massive.
It is an incredible run, no doubt about it. But the way this book looks at greatness is, well, a bit different. It's not just the raw number. Right. It's about relative performance. So how much did they beat the overall market, like the S&P 500? And crucially, how much did they beat their direct competitors, their industry peers?
Okay. So it's performance compared to the field.
Exactly. And when you apply that filter, Welch, who beat the S&P by about 3.3 times, he did great, obviously, but he's not really near the top of this list.
Really? So who is?
The actual winner, according to this, is a name most people probably haven't heard. Henry Singleton, who ran a company called Teledyne.
Singleton, Teledyne. Okay.
His raw return was slightly lower, actually 20.4% compounded. But here's the thing. He did it for 28 years. And over that time, he outperformed the S&P 500 by, wait for it, 12 times.
12 times. Over nearly 3 decades.
12 times. It's just staggering.
I think that's unbelievable, longevity and performance. So Singleton, and the book mentions others like Warren Buffett, John Malone, Katharine Graham. They're part of this sort of intellectual village.
That's the term the author uses, yeah. And our goal today is to kind of distill the shared playbook these 8 CEOs used, because their success wasn't about being in the same industry. It was about a shared, really counterintuitive way of thinking.
And blueprint, like the title says.
Right. And to get that blueprint, you have to start with their most fundamental, most unconventional idea.
Which is?
That the single most important job of any CEO isn't running operations or marketing or even having the grand vision. It's capital allocation.
Capital allocation.
Yeah. Simply deciding how the company should use its money, its cash.
Okay, hold on. That sounds a bit reductive. I mean, if you've spent your whole career becoming an expert in, I don't know, engineering or product development, you finally get the top job, and now that expertise is secondary.
It does sound counterintuitive, I get it. But Warren Buffett actually has a great quote about this. He points out that most people become CEO based on expertise in one area, right? But then suddenly they're responsible for this totally different critical job allocating capital that they've probably never done before and have zero training for.
It's like asking a great violinist to suddenly conduct the whole orchestra.
Kind of, yeah. The skills just don't necessarily translate.
Okay, so let's break down this toolkit then. What are the options for a CEO with a pile of cash?
Basically 5 main choices. You can reinvest it back into the business you already have. You can acquire another business. You can give it back to shareholders as dividends.
Right.
You can pay down company debt. Or number 5, you can buy back your own company's stock.
And the book's argument is that those decisions, over the long run, make all the difference.
Absolutely. You could have 2 companies, identical operations, identical results year after year, but based only on how their CEOs allocated that cash flow, their shareholder returns could end up worlds apart.
Wow, okay.
And the CEOs who really nailed this, the outsiders, they didn't look like your typical charismatic leader, not the media darlings.
So not the Jack Welch type, necessarily.
Often not, no. They were frequently first-time CEOs, sometimes new to the industry entirely, so they came in without the baggage of how things are always done. They had fresh eyes.
Interesting. So less like seasoned industry captains, more like CAC outsiders.
Exactly. And they tended to be intellectual foxes. Yeah. You know, the Isaiah Berlin idea?
Vaguely. Foxes know many things. Hedgehogs know one big thing.
Right. They could pull ideas from different fields, make connections. They weren't just deep experts in one narrow area. Their whole mindset was about intelligent iconoclasm.
Intelligent iconoclasm. I like that.
It's like Billy Beane in Moneyball, right? Using data and pure logic to question everything everyone else just assumes is true.
Okay, so this iconoclastic, fox-like thinking led them all to a similar playbook, even though they were in totally different businesses.
Yep. Manufacturing, media, defense, consumer goods. Didn't matter. They landed on roughly the same core principles. 7 of them, really.
Let's list them out. What's the Singletonville blueprint?
Okay, principle 1 we've covered. Capital allocation is job number 1 for the CEO. That's the foundation.
Got it.
Principle 2 follows directly. Focus relentlessly on per share value. Not overall company size, not revenue growth headlines. What matters is the value of each individual share.
Which means they were okay with the company actually shrinking sometime.
Totally okay with it. If shrinking the pie made each slice bigger, value-wise, they'd do it.
That leads right into number 3, I bet. Something about measuring value.
You got it. Principle 3. Cash flow, not reported earnings, is what really determines value. They saw net income, or EPS, as kind of a blunt instrument. Too easily swayed by accounting rules, non-cash stuff.
So cash is king. Actual cash generated.
That's the real fuel you can allocate. Which connects to Principle 4, radically decentralized organizations.
Why decentralized? How does that link to cash?
Well, big central bureaucracies tend to, suck up cash. They build empires, add overhead, create internal friction or rancor, as the book calls it.
Ah, okay. Keep things lean.
Exactly. Push decisions down, make managers accountable for their own piece of the pie. It keeps capital closer to where it's actually generated and used.
Makes sense. Principle 5.
This one's about mindset, about temperament. Independent thinking is absolutely essential. You have to actively ignore the din, the noise from Wall Street, from the media.
Easier said than done, I imagine.
For sure. But it helped that a lot of these folks were physically located away from the New York financial hub. They weren't breathing that air every day.
Okay. 2 left. Investment strategy.
Yep. Principle 6. Often, the best investment you can make is in your own company's stock. They treated buying back shares just like buying another company. If their stock was cheap relative to its value, that was often the highest return, lowest risk option available.
Buy low, basically. Your own stock.
Right. And Principle 7 kind of complements that. Be patient with acquisitions, wait for the perfect pitch. But when that pitch comes, you need to be ready to swing hard. Be bold occasionally.
So, years of patience punctuated by moments of extreme action.
That's the pattern.
Okay, let's circle back to the original outsider then. Henry Singleton at Teledyne. You said he was a mathematician.
And how? PhD in electrical engineering from MIT, apparently programmed their first computer, worked on degaussing ships in World War II, a serious intellectual powerhouse.
And he applied that math brain to running the company.
Directly. I mean, his actions were just completely outside the norm for CEOs back then. For 26 years, Teledyne paid no dividends.
26 years, no dividends. Shareholders must have hated that.
Well, maybe initially. But he believed dividends were tax inefficient. Why pay out cash just to have the government take a cut when he could reinvest it internally at a higher rate? And instead of obsessing over earnings per share, the Wall Street darling metric, he created his own internal metric, called it the Teledyne return.
The Teledyne return, what was that?
It was basically an average of cash flow and net income. He did that specifically to prioritize cash flow generation over just hitting a reported earnings number, and management bonuses were tied to it.
So he forced everyone to focus on generating actual usable cash, not just accounting profits.
Precisely. It stripped out the noise, but the move that really cemented his legacy, that was the stock buyback program.
The one where he bought back almost all the stock.
Yeah, starting around 1972, he just went on this incredible spree, ended up repurchasing over 90% of Teledyne's shares over time.
90%. That's practically taking the company private piece by piece.
Almost. And he was incredibly disciplined about it. He only bought aggressively when the stock looked cheap. The average price-to-earnings ratio on his buybacks was under 8.
Well, it wasn't just always buying, right? You mentioned flexibility.
Exactly. That's the genius part.
Yeah.
Earlier on, when Teledyne's stock was flying high, trading at PEs over 25, he used that expensive stock as currency to buy other businesses.
Ah, so sell high, buy low, applied to his own shares.
Right. He wasn't dogmatic. He adapted. Like Keynes allegedly said, when the facts change, I change my mind. Singleton lived that.
That focus on per-share value, even if it means shrinking, that seems key.
Yeah.
You see that with Tom Murphy at Capital Cities too, right? The rowboat versus CBS, the QE2.
Oh, absolutely. Murphy was all about operational efficiency, ruthless frugality. His whole philosophy was like, the goal is not to have the longest train, but to arrive at the station first using the least fuel.
Ah, that's a great line.
And they lived it. There's this amazing story about their first TV station. It was in this rundown old building.
Yeah.
And Murphy apparently only authorized them to paint the sides of the building that faced the road, just to save a few bucks on paint.
No way.
Yes. That kind of cost consciousness was baked into the culture. It meant they didn't waste the cash they generated through smart operations.
And sometimes that rationality means not just being frugal, but actually taking things apart, like Bill Anders at General Dynamics.
Right. Anders, the former astronaut, took over GD just as the Cold War ended. The Berlin Wall came down.
Bad news for a defense contractor.
Terrible news. Massive overcapacity across the whole industry. And Anders, looking at it rationally, didn't try to just, ride it out or pretend things would go back to normal. He decided the only logical path was to shrink aggressively.
That must have been incredibly difficult culturally and emotionally.
No doubt, especially, selling off iconic programs. The book talks about the F-16 fighter business. Anders apparently loved that division personally. But when Lockheed Martin came in and offered a really, really high price for it, a price he knew was above its long-term intrinsic value, he sold it instantly.
Even though it cut the company in half.
Even though it cut the company basically in half, because it was the rational thing to do to maximize value for each shareholder. It wasn't about ego or empire size.
And what did they do with the cash from that sale and other cuts?
They generated something like $5 billion through asset sales and just tightening operations. There was this rule about a 2-canopy maximum for inventory on certain parts, just relentless focus. And they returned most of that cash windfall back to shareholders through special dividends and buybacks. Very tax efficiently, of course.
These guys were like financial surgeons, just constantly optimizing the company's health.
That's a good way to think about it. Which brings us to maybe the ultimate financial engineer on the list, John Malone at TCI.
The cable cowboy.
Right. Malone was laser-focused on two things, scale and taxes. Or rather, minimizing taxes.
How did scale help in cable?
His big insight was simple arithmetic, as he put it. In cable TV, your biggest cost by far is programming, paying ESPN, HBO, etc. Malone realized that if TCI became the biggest player, they'd have enormous leverage to demand the lowest programming fees from the networks.
Volume discount.
Exactly. Yep. Which made TCI more profitable, which allowed them to buy more cable systems, which made them bigger, giving them even more leverage. A virtuous cycle of scale.
Okay, makes sense. But the tax part, that was legendary, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Malone basically viewed taxes as just another cost to be minimized, legally, of course. He famously said something like, it's better to pay interest than taxes.
How did he manage that?
He was a master at using depreciation, the accounting charge, for assets wearing out and debt interest payments to shelter TCI's cash flow. The result was that TCI, while generating enormous amounts of cash, almost never reported significant net income on its accounting statements.
So they paid hardly any corporate income tax.
Very little, for decades. While growing their cash flow something like 20-fold, all that cash stayed in the business, compounding instead of going to Uncle Sam.
That's pretty clever financial engineering.
Extremely. So if Malone used debt and scale as his, let's say, rocket fuel, Warren Buffett over at Berkshire Hathaway uses something else.
Insurance float.
Insurance float. That's the magic ingredient. It's the premiums insurance companies collect up front before they have to pay out claims later.
So it's like getting to hold on to other people's money for a while.
Exactly. And invest it for your own benefit in the meantime. Buffett realized early on that this float, if your insurance businesses are run well, is an incredibly cheap, long-term source of capital. Berkshire's float grew from like $237 million in 1970 to over $70 billion by 2011.
$70 billion, that's a lot of fuel for investment.
It's the engine of Berkshire. But what's also fascinating is how Buffett runs the place. It's kind of a paradox.
How so?
Well, you have extreme centralization when it comes to capital allocation. Buffett himself, maybe with Charlie Munger, makes all the big investment decisions. No big M&A department, no layers of committees.
Okay.
But then you have extreme decentralization for the actual businesses Berkshire owns. The managers of See's Candies or Geico or BNSF Railway, they run their operations almost completely autonomously. Buffett doesn't interfere.
Huh. Trust the managers to run the business, but keep the checkbook locked up tight in Omaha.
Pretty much. The whole structure is designed to minimize turnover, both financial turnover and human turnover, to let that power of long-term compounding really work its magic.
So looking across all these figures, Singleton, Murphy, Anders, Malone, Buffett, what's the common thread? It's not industry, it's not even necessarily raw IQ, is it?
I think the book argues, and I'd agree, it's really about temperament. Their core advantage was this thing we're calling radical rationality.
Radical rationality.
Yeah. It wasn't about having some secret insight nobody else had. It was about having the discipline, the emotional fortitude to ignore the crowds, ignore the conventional wisdom, and just consistently apply cold, hard logic and basic math to every decision, especially the capital decisions.
Simplifying things down to the economic essence.
Yes, over and over again.
Okay, so if we're trying to pull some actionable advice from this for, executives or investors listening, what are the key takeaways? What's the checklist inspired by these outsiders?
Well, first, I think you absolutely have to internalize that core idea. Allocating capital is the main job. You have to constantly think about those 5 choices and which one creates the most long-term value.
Right. Job 1.
Second, you need that relentless focus on after-tax returns. Are you really comparing apples to apples when you think about investing internally versus maybe buying another company or buying back stock? Are you calculating based on the cash you actually get to keep and redeploy after the tax man takes his cut?
Good point. Taxes leak value.
They absolutely do. And finally, maybe the hardest part is the temperament test.
Okay.
Ask yourself, do your acquisitions, the companies you buy, do they meaningfully offer a better return than just buying back your own stock at its current price? Be brutally honest.
That's a tough comparison to make sometimes.
It is. And related to that, when the market panics, when things get scary, like in 2008, are you prepared to act? Remember, that's when Buffett and Malone were being very greedy, as Buffett says. Are you ready to be rational, even bold, when everyone else is frozen by fear?
That's the real test, isn't it?
That, I think, is the ultimate difference between just managing and practicing radical rationality.